I'm thrilled to welcome the brilliant Bill Walton to Some Future Day. Together, we're diving into the heart of today's hottest economic issues, from explosive tariff wars to the AI revolution that's reshaping everything we know. You've probably heard plenty of chatter about tariffs, but did you know America's exports to Canada and Mexico make up just 2.3% of our GDP? Yet we account for over 31% of Mexico's GDP and nearly 20% of Canada's. Bill Walton reveals why this imbalance gives America enormous leverage and how Trump-era policies might reshape global trade wars in ways you haven't imagined.
It's combustible. I don't think we're just making an economic analysis. I think we've got to look at a potential military outcome.
We also get deep into how artificial intelligence and automation are shaking up job markets and innovation. Bill predicts massive shifts in white-collar professions, shares why new tech breakthroughs in AI and crypto will trigger a fresh wave of job creation, and offers his surprising take on who wins and who loses in this brave new economy.
I've talked with some people yesterday who are in that industry, and they say, yeah, the people who've got the code writing talent are out of work now. And they're trying to figure out a way to find something else to do.
This conversation is a roadmap to understanding America's future. Bill, thank you for joining me on this episode of Some Future Day. Bill Walton, it's such an honor to have you join me on Some Future Day. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. I followed you on YouTube and your books, and I feel like I should be interviewing you.
Maybe someday.
Okay.
Maybe someday. But let's start looking at the tariff wars. They're like such a hot button right now. I feel like a lot of people are just talking, the talking heads in the media, all of my friends who have become experts on tariffs. Something that people aren't talking about, though, is the GDP percentage of exports. And it's really interesting if you look at these numbers, if I could just quickly share them. The United States exports to Canada and Mexico represent 2.3% of the United States total GDP, whereas exports from Mexico and Canada into the United States are far greater. In fact, 31.7% of Mexico's GDP is derived from exports to the United States, 31.7%, Bill, and 19.6% of Canada's GDP are comprised of their exports to the United States. So I think that's a real interesting juxtaposition. United States exports to Canada and Mexico, 2.3%. 31.7% for Mexico, 19.6% for Canada, far greater. So let's start with tariffs. How do you look at how would you analyze those numbers? Like, are those numbers important, and what do they mean?
Well, they're vitally, and as Donald Trump would say, it puts America in a position where we hold the cards. If we sneeze, Mexico and Canada catch pneumonia. Because their economies are totally dependent on trade with the United States, and any diminution of that trade is going to hurt them very badly. So, if this continues, where we're going tit for tat with tariffs, I think Canada is going to be holding a gun to its own head. Now, I'm in the camp. I came from the free trade camp, and I don't really think tariffs are something that ought to be part of the permanent part of the economic landscape. I like what President Trump is doing by calling what he's talking, he's seeking reciprocity, where if one side's going to have tariffs, the other side should have it, but it ought to be the same percentage, which I think that seems fair to everybody. And then, of course, we've got China, which is a wholly different kettle of fish, but we can stick just with and I think the free trade idea in North America, it was a very good one, but unfortunately our negotiators gave up an awful lot to Canada and Mexico to achieve that, and Trump is going to fix that. I'm a big fan of what he's doing.
Well, it's interesting, Bill, because I often look at whether or not we are in a free marketplace, whether we really have a capitalistic economy. So I see you're nodding your head to the negative. We don't. So are you suggesting that should we eliminate perhaps all global tariffs? Like, what would happen if we had a free marketplace?
Well, it's not clear that that would be good for us strategically because, the whole theory is based on some 18th century economists when they talked about the theory of comparative advantage. And it's basically if a country can be a low cost producer, it ought to dominate the market. And if another country dominates another industry, they should be the dominant producer in that market. Well, that's fine, except if you're talking about something like pharmaceuticals. And we saw during the COVID catastrophe that we were horribly dependent upon China in our supply chain when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs. We can't even manufacture aspirin in America. We can't manufacture antibiotics. So it's not necessarily tariffs that would cause that balance, but I think you can't look at free markets and treat countries' borders as if they're not relevant. They are, and so there's a strategic element, a national defense element, a national security element that we got to factor in.
Well, naturally, pricing and cost of goods becomes an issue when you get into this tariff discussion. And of course, on the pharmaceutical side, one realizes medicine is expensive here in the United States. And perhaps that's why so many of our pharmaceuticals are now created not just in China, to your point, but in India as well. Generally speaking, though, beyond the pharmaceutical piece, I have so many friends that they're going crazy over the fact that Trump is increasing the tariffs and they're saying it's going to be terrible. It's going to cause inflation. The cost of everything is going to go up because of China in particular. What do you think, Bill? Do you think that we'll see a jump
Well,
in consumer prices?
I think he's playing the long game. I mean, I'm good friends with Bob Lighthizer, who's his trade representative in the last in Trump 1.0, and Donald Trump is really working to bring manufacturing and jobs back to the United States. And the United States through the 18th and 19th century, most all the way up through the mid 1850s, 1870s, was operated behind a very serious tariff barrier, and it allowed a lot of the industries, the nascent industries in the U.S., to grow and establish a strong competitive edge. And what we've done by letting other countries keep us out of their markets while we're letting them in our markets is we've really hurt domestic manufacturing. What have we lost? 90,000 manufacturing plants in the last 30, 40 years. So I'm willing to suffer a little. I think he will say this. I'm willing to suffer a little short-term pain in order to create incentives for companies both here and abroad to set up manufacturing and distribution in the U.S.
So that's the trade-off, right? We
Yeah,
think that it
it's
should
time
work.
frame.
And yeah. So which sectors do you think will benefit most from that? Where do you think the jobs will be created as, let's say, foreign companies enter the United States for production of their goods?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, and then I'm not sure. Obviously, automotive is going to be one of those areas that could benefit from that. When you look at the high tech portion of it, it's not clear how many jobs that's actually going to create. Uh, and I guess I'm going to default on that question because I can't predict what it is. But I do think that the number of jobs we're going to need for manufacturing in 2025 are not even remotely similar to the kind of jobs we'd need for a manufacturing plant in 1975. In 50 years, we've seen tremendous increases in productivity of labor. So you may need half the people or a third of the people to do the same thing you did 50 years ago. But nevertheless, it is being done here, and as I mentioned, there's a strategic advantage to having it here.
Yeah, I see that too. I see that as well. I think
There's one other
one,
thing I want to mention though is that
mm,
there's this we got
please.
into this idea, and I'm afraid I was one of the people who really believed this was that you do design in the United States and then you could outsource manufacturing to another country. I've now come to think that you can't really do that. You got to be close to the manufacturing element when you're designing because you learn an awful lot when you make things. And I think that's one of the advantages the Chinese have. I mean, what do they represent now? 25, 30% of global manufacturing. And so bringing manufacturing back end to match up with what companies are doing in the design side, I think would be a good thing. It would help spur innovation even more than what we have now.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's a great point. Personally, I'm an individual who believes that superior design drives businesses, drives entire sectors. And you could go across from like the lifestyle categories, fashion, music, art, but then go into like travel, hospitality. Like we're starting to see new designs come out, not just in automotive, but consumer driven, consumer airplanes and beyond. So it's interesting that you're saying that. I think innovation and design at the end of the day does do a lot beyond just the utility that a product might provide the American consumer.
Right.
So Bill, let's think the other way though. There is a risk beyond just the economics as it relates to these tariffs, and we're starting to see some retaliation. Right there are countries like Canada this week that are raising their tariffs on us, and I'm curious, like, what other risks? What other types of retaliation can we see from foreign countries on America as we raise our tariffs?
Well, I think tariffs would be the main one. I don't see that there are many other weapons in their quiver. It's not like Europe in particular has been bereft of technological innovation. I looked at a chart the other day that showed the market cap of companies that have reached $1 billion in the last 50 years, and about 99% of those companies are in the United States, and about 1% are in Europe. And so it's not like they can use their technological edge to intimidate us or withhold ideas and innovation. And I'm not even sure any other country can really. So I think tariffs would be the main tool. And I think it sounds like you agree with it too. I think tariffs are a tremendously blunt instrument. And I think one of the things that's happening with tariffs now is we have them one day and then we don't have them the next, and then we have them the day after that. And what businesses don't like is uncertainty. And we've got of all the things Trump's doing on the economy, I think the one that's the messiest is this trade thing we're talking about, and the ones that potentially the most detrimental if we don't do it right.
Yeah, what do you think will happen short term with regards to the tariff situation? It seems like a lot of this is President Trump posturing, negotiating, trying to find benefits beyond just economies. For example, stopping the trade of fentanyl into the nation and beyond. But in your mind, what do you think will happen?
Well, I think he's pretty serious about the fentanyl. I mean, it's been a plague in this country, and we've got 100,000 people dying every year. And of course, Mexico and Canada are just the conduits through which they come in to the U.S. It's really China that's manufacturing the lethal stuff, for at least most of it. But Mexico's interesting because you could have tariffs, erect a tariff barrier in Mexico, which would influence their manufacturing. But I'm wonder how much of Mexico controls itself. I think the entire northern border is in the hands of the cartels, and yeah, we've declared cartels a terrorist organization. And so I think one of the games that may be played out is whether we get the army involved in dealing with the tariffs. And so it's combustible. I don't think we're just making an economic analysis. I think we've got to look at a potential military outcome.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The fentanyl issue to me, um, there are some other issues too that fall into what I'm about to say, but for me, it really strikes a chord. It resonates with me personally because my 18-year-old cousin died from fentanyl. And, there are a
Yeah.
lot of issues that come with that, granted, right? Like, he shouldn't have been mixed up with drugs in the first place, but he died. And it's an issue that I don't see that should be political. I didn't understand why the Biden administration didn't attack that issue further. And it feels like fentanyl has become a political issue, but it doesn't have to be, right?
Well, it's Trump derangement. I mean, Democrats now find themselves supporting what Elon Musk has uncovered as fraud. I mean, they're defending the indefensible, and everything has become partisan because anything Trump wants. I mean, look what happened when Biden came in. He took everything that Trump did, had his own stack of executive orders, and it didn't matter what it was; they were going to reverse it. and they did a lot. They're doing a lot of damage to the country, and they're also doing a lot of damage to their own brand, their own party.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I don't think legislation could keep up with the Trump administration, right? Do you see Congress moving fast enough?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. I love it. I mean, you worked with him very closely. What was it like working
Well,
with him? I think
I
you were
didn't
with
work with
him in
him that
27.
closely. I was in the
Yeah.
first transition in 2016, 2017, and he was just pretty new at all this. And we were down in Washington. We had some tremendous economic experts. I handled the action plans for all of the financial agencies and cabinet roles. It's about a third of the government. It was very, very interesting. We had about 200 people developing good action plans for these departments. And but Trump was he was up in New York in Trump Tower, and so and when we started in with the action or planning of the transition, as they call it, this was in the summer before the election. He didn't want to have much to do with this because he thought planning what you're going to do when you won an election was bad luck. And if he was absolutely right when it came, Mitt Romney, by comparison, had a wonderful set of plans that he developed, but then he forgot to win the election. and so, and so it was, I think there was a lot of disconnects then, and what we've seen now in Trump 2.0, this started last summer in Mar-a-Lago, probably long before that, where they were developing detailed plans in conjunction with him personally for what they wanted to do if he won the election and what to do after it was inaugurated. And I think with people like Russ Vought on the job heading up OMB, they're running this thing like clockwork. Uh, as I mentioned, the only thing I think has gotten really messy is the tariffs, but everything else I like. I like what they're doing.
Well, one area that you and I find really interesting is in emerging technology. Certainly, Trump's planning both AI and crypto to become a major pillar within his forward looking economic strategy. I know that they've been planning it. And I mentioned to you, I was in Washington, D.C. this past Friday at the Crypto Summit, which was incredible to see, an incredible experience. So, artificial intelligence should do a lot as it relates to innovation, creativity, job growth, perhaps. Where do you feel the country's going as it relates to these two sectors, artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency?
Well, I think artificial intelligence is inevitable. I mean, it's got such momentum now, and thousands of millions of people who creating creating the technology as we speak, and it's vastly different than it was even 3 months ago. And we're seeing innovations. I'm invested in a hardware company that's we're making a chip which we think is a better alternative than NVIDIA's. So stay tuned. But
Needed. It's
these
needed.
things work one in a thousand. But if it works, it's definitely worth it. But there's so much change going on. I think it's inevitable. I saw a statistic the other day that just look at regular manufacturing and service companies in America in the last 3 or 4 years, the number of people, the percentage of people they're trying to hire that has AI skills has jumped from almost nothing to 30-40%. So every company in America is looking at people that know something about it. Now, most of those hires are not going to be ready to go to work for Claude AI or for ChatGPT. It's just basically people who can talk to AI and help do some research on it. But it's going to pervade every industry. And I also, the other thing that's happening, and I know we talked about the impact on jobs, but Goldman Sachs is telling us that. And I came up through the investment banking business. Is that in the old days when you did an offering, you needed 5 to 15 people, analysts and lawyers, accountants, to put together an offering memorandum, and it would take 3 months to do that, roughly. And now what they can do, they can prepare an offering memorandum about 95% of what they need using AI in about 5 minutes. And so the question is, how are we going to redeploy that talent, which is a high level of talent, and is something else even more productive than what they're doing before.
So, Bill, historically, let's face it, America gets crazed when new technologies come. People fear that technologies will disrupt and eliminate jobs. We've seen that historically, whether it's been with the advent of the automobile and beyond. What do you think is going to happen here as you go a little bit deeper into the job landscape? Which sectors do you anticipate will lose jobs?
Well, I think the white collar sector is the most vulnerable, and the CEO of Claude, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. You probably know it. Who owns Claude? Anyway, they're very credible guy, and he said that right now he thinks that like 75 to 80% of the code can be developed using AI. And by the end of the year, he thinks 100% of it can be done where AI is, writing its own code. And so what that does for people, and I've talked with some people yesterday who are in that industry, and they say, yeah, the people who've got the code writing talent are out of work now, and they're trying to figure out a way to find something else to do. So I think, and then as I mentioned, the accounting industry is going to be affected. The legal profession is going to be affected.
I agree.
I think actually the mental health profession is going to have a very interesting
I agree.
competitor because you can sit with Claude or ChatGPT or any one of these things and start asking questions and tell them about this or that. Next thing you know, they're providing counseling. So,
Bill,
so
I got to tell you, I have a business colleague who he and his wife have agreed to use ChatGPT to resolve their marital issues.
I think that's
Literally.
I think why not? I mean, if we think about it, what have these AI companies done? And you write about it in your book. They've basically surveyed the planet and they've captured every single word that's ever been written on a topic by
Correct.
everyone. And so, if you survey the mental health literature and the counseling literature, they're going to have access to the best thinking about what works and what doesn't work. And but we both know is if you got to prompt the AI with the right questions and you got to deal with it so you get answers that are useful. And there are a lot of biases built into AI, but I think they're on the right track. And so in the marriage counseling business, maybe another one that's likely to be threatened.
So, Bill, whereas I agree with you that the white collar jobs, including law, accounting, these other types of services that you're recommending, I think that they will be hit. There's no doubt about it. I entirely agree with you. Um, but let's just hover over the issue of code writing for a second because it's really interesting. Think about it like this. So historically, people like you are creative, you're innovative, you're a builder. You come from a background where you're investing dollars in creating companies and creating jobs. But what you can't do is code. Now the language is changing. The coding language is English. All of a sudden, Bill Walton could come up with this new financial instrument, could come up with this really cool utility based financial instrument that the masses could use. And in plain English, Bill Walton could become a new coder. And that business could stand up in a way that nobody thought about before, and in turn, create new jobs. What about the ecosystem that artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency will require as it relates to new jobs? Experts in finance and AI, law and AI, creative industries and AI. Do you think perhaps the fact that coding the new language for coding is English, and everyone on the planet could become a coder. New businesses, new innovation, advances in medicine and weapons of war and beyond. Do you think that's going to turn new jobs up
I think it will
eventually?
ultimately. I think the question is just the time frame. I mean, every time we've seen a massive change in technology, whether it's the manufacturing in the 1800s, which got people out of the agricultural sector and into factories, or when the electronic age came in and people ended up working in radio and TV and things like that. There's always been transitions where most of society does find itself doing more interesting, higher value stuff. the question I have is this: I don't think we've ever seen anything advance as quickly uh, as AI has, and so how quickly people can make that adjustment, and do they have the talent to do it? Now, I hope you're not going to force me to write code. That's one of the things. That's one of the things I never wanted to do.
We're
So,
going there, baby. We're
do you know
going there,
do you know how
baby.
to write code?
We're
Are you conversant in that?
Definitely not. But
Okay.
I could tell you this, like with a background in law, I see what artificial intelligence platforms are being built, like Harvey, for example,
Yeah.
and they're exceptional. They're really exceptional. And I do think we'll see entire slivers of industry wiped out as a result of it. But I do believe humans beat machines all day long. I really do. But I think we'll see. My feeling is that new jobs will be created and it's going to be very valuable to society. From an economic perspective, we'll see more growth. But I also believe with that, we'll see other benefits, not just people having the time to spend with family and their loved ones, but innovative people. Again, like you're a builder, people like you will have more time to concentrate then on creating new innovative businesses, perhaps then trickling over into important areas like food and healthcare and beyond. I think that the advent of artificial intelligence is going to radically change the way our society functions within 3 to 5 years. I really am very bullish. I think it's going to happen quickly. I see the technology growing. I know what's coming next. I think we're going to see AGI way quicker than we expect, and that's going to create a lot of advances for us too.
What do you think about robots?
I love robots. I I
Why
write
am I
about
why am
it.
I not surprised?
I write about it in the book. It's efficient. We're there
Yeah,
already, right? When you
yeah,
start to think about AVs or autonomous vehicles are
yeah.
already, functioning and legal in certain states. I think one sector that where we're gonna see tremendous growth with robots, Bill, is in the security sector, not just with regards to drones, but also with regards to home security, with regards to security for offices, banks. It's going to really stand up in a major way. And I think robots are going to play a big role also in transitioning people away from the monotonous tasks that they hate. Think in terms of cooking or folding laundry or beyond. And as they become more affordable from companies, including like Elon Musk's company, Tesla, will start to see shared robots at first, running errands, going grocery shopping, coming into your home and stacking the shelves. And it's going to create more efficiencies. People will have time to, focus on the things that are important to them, family, friends, their loved ones, creating new businesses because of robots.
Well, I know in the venture capital area, I'm coming back to AI. What I'm hearing is that when they do seed capital or early stage capital, they're finding the number of hires they need to get it off the ground is they're dramatically fewer people than they used to, and they can get to dollar scale much more rapidly using AI than they could by hiring a team of people. And that what they've done is they've spread their bets across more companies, and so I think we could see a proliferation of innovation because the VC world can, instead of, if you're running a VC fund, instead of doing 10 deals, you might do 2025 and let the best company win. I know we're also seeing some convergence. We're not converged. It used to be you invested in venture capital, you'd pick one company in a sector and you were going to stay loyal to that. Now what they're beginning to do is seed you know, eight or nine companies, so they've got them in the portfolio. And if one of them takes off, they put their capital behind that, and that's all a function of this AI revolution.
Yeah, I think America needs that. That's the way we grew Web 2, right? Money went into Silicon Valley to prop up all of these e-com businesses, these Web 2 businesses. Apps were built, and then we had, a lot of liquidity as a result of the internet effectively working for everyone. And I think
Yeah.
we're going to see that growth with AI too. What's interesting though, and I want to go back to one of your investments that you highlighted quickly on the chip side. Artificial intelligence, the ecosystem really is comprised of three components. There's energy, there's hardware, there's the algorithm, the software. And your investment with regards to the chip side of it is interesting to me in particular because of what we saw with DeepSeek. What we saw with DeepSeek was two things, and it challenged NVIDIA. Number one, we saw consumers don't really care whether or not they have the best chip available behind running the LLM or training the LLM, right? From an inference perspective or from a training perspective, they could care less. They just want answers, number one, that seem to be correct. And number two, they want affordability. So, what I believe happened with DeepSeek, or one component of that entire transaction that, like, crushed NVIDIA for a second, was and DeepSeek was able to use, I think they stole a few chips there. I think some chips were not, they didn't steal, but I think some chips were sent into DeepSeek through Singapore, and that's a whole other story. But I think DeepSeek used lesser quality chips than the NVIDIA super chip. And as a result, there is, I think, the moat, NVIDIA's moat has opened up. I know a lot of the big tech companies, including Amazon and Google, are building their own chips too right now as we speak. I'm curious, what's your perspective on the chip industry? Where do you think we're going there?
Well, my entrepreneurs believe that the NVIDIA chip, which was great for graphics and computer games and that sort of thing, has kind of reached its limit in terms of what it's doing with AI. And we know that that particular chip requires a massive amount of power to do its work. And so, what we're working on is an alternative, and I can't really get into the details, an alternative type chip. And linking two or three of them together in a way that we could produce the same computing power, but using 10 times less electricity. And the limit one of the big limiting factors of AI, as you know, is we're going to need a lot of electrical power generation to feed these things, and so that's another part of the puzzle. We may not need as much if chip manufacturers can come up with a better mousetrap.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And obviously, a lot of energy use goes into cryptocurrency as well. I'm curious from your perspective, where does crypto stand up next to AI? How does that play into the model?
Well, I don't see, you're a crypto guy, so I don't want to, and you're the host. I don't want to get into too much. I'm not a,
That's okay.
I'm fairly agnostic about crypto because I think it's just another fiat currency. I think people have gotten together and they agree that crypto or Bitcoin is worth something because somebody else is willing to pay X for it. But again, the dollar is a fiat currency. It's not linked to anything like gold. So we've got a belief system which supports currencies, and right now we have a lot of people who believe that Bitcoin and all the related currencies have a great future. And as long as everybody believes that, it's going to have value. But I don't think maybe the Coinbase has solved the problem, but it's not really a good unit. It's not very good for transactions. It's pretty good for a store of value, maybe to create wealth, but I don't see it replacing dollars in that. Or of course, as I say that, I'm sure that somebody's already beginning to figure out how to do that if they haven't already done it. Maybe you could answer that question. When does it become valuable if you go to the grocery store?
I think the utility piece of it, as you're talking about as currency, is there today. But I don't believe that in Web3 we've created a system yet that's easy for most consumers. So we're going there. The other thing that I want to just be clear about as it relates to my own philosophy is that I imagine you agree with me on this, by the way, just from what you just said. But like, I think we would be foolish to try to eliminate the US dollar fiat currency
Yeah.
with cryptocurrency now. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous concept ever. We should stand up crypto and start building on top of it because after all, young millennials, Gen Z, and frankly, Gen Alpha also, they're all digital, right? Everything they're doing is digital. So as a developing a digital currency, digital assets, and beyond, it matters. And to have the United States government try to put our country in a lead position there could be super valuable. But we should not think about eliminating the US dollar right now. That would just be absurd.
Well, it would be, and I've got a streak of libertarian in me, not entirely, but a lot. And when crypto first currency, when it first started emerging, I thought this was a tremendous way to create a store of value and transactions that were apart from governments.
Yes.
And that was very appealing. And I guess my concern now is that we're now creating a crypto reserve and the US government's going to be involved in it. It makes me very skeptical that we're going to escape the predations of the federal government. And I think that's a bad part of it, as opposed. So I'm not really cheering the creation of this reserve because it gets us more into the business. I would like the federal government to be out of the business, but yet have regulation, probably through the SEC, so that we could let 1,000 flowers bloom or something like that, and let many of innovations come up, and let this operate separate and apart from the government.
Truly decentralized. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the nature of cryptocurrency. One person who was noticeably missing from the crypto summit is the founder of the Cardano protocol and the ADA cryptocurrency. And one of his criticisms of the event that occurred at the White House is exactly this issue. It's a decentralized platform. It is a decentralized way of doing business. Put the power into the individual. It's about
Yeah,
liberty and freedom. And if the government is centralizing it, it contradicts everything that crypto is being built for.
exactly. That's my view. So but I'm not as deeply invested in it. I've dipped my toe in it, but it's not. And I know Michael Saylor. I met him when he was 20 years ago when he was doing .com things, and I'm not. I don't have Michael Saylor's enthusiasm to it, but I don't know that I'd want to own his stock though, because hasn't he leveraged up tremendously to own his cache of Bitcoin and other currencies?
Yeah, that's right. He is the single largest holder of Bitcoin and obviously very public about it, although it is transparent. But what's interesting about Bitcoin is the fact that there is only a finite amount of Bitcoin that's created. There are 21 million units.
Yeah.
And because of that, it is inflation proof, right? We're living in a day and age, Bill, that is post trust. We don't trust the government and the manipulation of our currency and how they impact or adversely impact our currency. And as a result, we hit inflation. In fact, I have another stat here that I pulled in anticipation of speaking with you. The Pew Research Center from February of 2025 cited that inflation remains a very big problem, according to 63% of Americans, and it continues to strain household budgets, prices for essentials like groceries and even gasoline. So, how do you expect the new administration, beyond their little play with crypto right now, how do you expect them to really lay in new economic policies to combat inflation and interest rate hikes and so on?
Well, it's going to be a long slog. There's no instant fix. I mean, tariffs add a small amount to inflation compared to what happens when you finance massive deficits by issuing debt, and that's essentially what we've done. Didn't I? I think I heard that 40% of the currency um, that exists now was created in the last 4 years.
Wow, that's massive.
And so, yeah, that's why we've got inflation. So you got to break it into there's no one thing you do. I mean, one of the things you do is you begin to deregulate massively, so you can free up the wealth creators to do what they do and create jobs and new products and better quality products are deflationary in the way they operate. You also get the deficit down, which is what we hope is Elon Musk is doing with Doge, and I think the other side of this, not just an economic issue, but I think we're discovering a lot of fraud in a lot of these programs, particularly NGOs. So you pull that out of the equation and you begin to reduce the amount of dollars that the United States is putting out there. That will help. Um, and I think tax policy, if we renew the tax cuts and we create incentives for companies to reinvest in productivity and new products, I think that'll be deflationary. But it's not, you can't just sort of say we're going to do this one thing and it's going to go away. I know, of course, when you when you kill billions of chickens, you can kind of expect egg prices to go up.
Right. I mean, it's weird. I right here in New York City, I recently went to Trader Joe's, and there were no eggs. You couldn't buy eggs, zero eggs. I've never seen that before in my lifetime. Incredible, actually.
But you know,
But
every fiat currency fails. I mean, it's we've got this issue where we've gone off our mooring of anything fixing our the value of our currency, and we're just trusting in government not to issue too much of it, and that trust has not been well founded. The dollar's worth what, 2% of what it was worth at the turn of the beginning of the 20th century, and
well,
I think government, particularly with Biden, has squandered its people's trust in it, and so I think the other thing is that part of getting the um, inflation tamped down is just reducing people's inflation expectations. I mean, inflation expectations have a way of raising prices all of their own because people buy things before they need them, and they drive prices up. So there's a very interesting algorithm that goes into this, and fortunately, I think Trump, for the most part, gets it. I know somebody like Kevin Hassett, who's running his one of his advisory councils, certainly gets it, and I know Scott Bessant, who's I think is very got a very big brain to deal with this, is likely to help solve it. I think the other thing you can do is restructure our debt. And I know that Scott's working on that, and there may be a way to finance out our treasury debt longer term, which would be helpful to our cash flow. Anyway, I think I'm ticking off too many too many things, but if you gave me the job to do that, and I don't need to do it because we got a lot of smart people in there now, I think these are the kind of things they're working on.
Well, I want to get to debt with you in a second, but just to stay on the inflation issue, like you'd mentioned that it's going to take time, that we need to look at it in a more holistic way. There are several factors that are causing the inflation, but let's face it, like, jokingly, we're talking about eggs, but, at the end of the day, the American family was probably sitting around their table before the election and looking at what the cost was just to eat. Right? Probably didn't have enough money to take a vacation or plan a vacation, scared that they were running out of money because of the prices of eggs and milk and gasoline and beyond. Cost of living is still high today. Granted, the new administration's only been in office for a second. I get that. I understand that. But how much time do you think it will really take to get inflation under control? Do you think businesses are willing to pull back the prices that they're getting right now and give up a potential, great profit margin at the end of the day?
No, no, I don't. It's not going to work that way. I mean, one of the ways you do something about it is you get energy prices down, and I happen to think fossil fuels are not the demon that some people portray them as, and you get gasoline prices down, and so forth, and that will dramatically help people's cost of living. And of course, a lot of what goes into agriculture is fertilizers, and fertilizers are driven by their source is the natural is fossil fuels, and so that's been pushing costs up, and the cost of what's grown on farms up. So you can do those sort of things, and that'll be helpful. So if we ticked off energy, we ticked off food. Uh, but I wanted to say this: people say they're worried about us going into a recession. I think we've been in a recession.
Mm, interesting.
I don't, this, I think if the average American could tell you how they've been faring in the last 4 years, and it has not been well. They've seen their wages have not kept up with inflation. They're looking at buying groceries that are 20-30% more than before. And the job creation, something like almost 90% of the jobs that were created or taken in the last couple of years went to people born outside the United States. And then the other part of job creation was in government jobs. And we've got the big piece of the government in our GDP statistics. And I think if you pull government out, you'll find we haven't been growing. We may have been shrinking. And so, we're going to, and I think Trump's right to say, look, we're going to have a little short term pain here for long term gain because I think we're really digging ourselves out of an economic hole. We've got this illusion of a great economy because stock market's been doing what it is, but has been. But now we're seeing that come off its tops. And so I don't know who's feeling richer today. I think most people are feeling a lot poorer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also when you look at Trump's new immigration policy, and you talked about job growth, 90% going to
That
unnaturalized,
that that
non.
I believe that I've got a 95% confidence level in that number, not 100%, but
Okay.
it's pretty
Yeah,
close to that.
but the fact is that we've seen job creation with regards to individuals who are not citizens of the United States, as well as expansion in government jobs. And now you
Right.
see Trump talking about shrinking the government. We're starting to see layoffs already with Doge and whatnot. And we're also looking at an immigration policy where ICE is coming in and taking a lot of these undocumented people out of the country. And a lot of those individuals are in areas that particularly in sectors that particularly see growth during the summer months. Think in terms of farming,
Yeah.
think in terms of construction. So I'm curious from your perspective, how will that come to play with regards to those sectors being impacted? If we don't have the
Well,
people to execute, right? If we don't have the people to build, if we don't have the people to farm, what's going to happen to these massive sectors?
I think that's why I talk about the trust factor. People are going to have to trust that the Trump administration is going to lead people to the economic promised land. And I think he can with the policies that he's implementing, but it's going to take time. And I think the job market in particular is going to be very messy. And there's going to be a lot of dislocation. I mean, I'm in the D.C. area, and people are asking the question, "What are we going to do if 100,000, 150,000 federal workers are unemployed? Can the private sector absorb them?" Well, certainly not in the short run. So they're either going to have to move, or we're going to have some entrepreneurs build businesses. You're right; we're going to have shortages of labor in the area of agriculture in the summer. And so I don't think we know. I mean, it'll be, I think, stay tuned. But I worry that when we go into the 2026 midterms, that a lot of this churn and pain in the job market might affect the Republicans' chances to keep their majorities.
Yeah, I think on that front, Trump needs to do two things, and to really protect those, let's say, Congress people who are in purple states. I think if he can lock in peace with regards to Ukraine, Russia, that's a big win for him. And those people who are in purple states can talk to peace, right? Like that's a win. And on the second side, we're hovering around it, but if we could balance the budget, if Trump could be literally the first president since Clinton to come in and say, like, look, we have either a balanced budget or a plan in place now that is will give us a balanced budget that's sustainable. I think that's the second win. And a lot of those Congress people leading into the midterms can have a certain amount of security in speaking to the voters within their districts and their constituency to win those elections.
Well, and the other thing is the amount of cuts we're talking about, trillions of dollars. Well, we're really talking about trying to bring government spending back to where it was 5 years ago in 2019 before the pandemic. And, that's eminently achievable if you're willing to get off the idea that once we've allocated some federal dollars, they're embedded in the budget forever. I know we're trying to roll back that thinking. And so I think the dollars are available to actually cut the budget significantly. The problem is that Trump can want to do it, but he's got to get it through Congress, and every congressman and senator sees the budget as pork coming back to their states. And so you want to look at what happened with ethanol. All of a sudden, the Iowa Corn Belt or the Midwest Corn Belt became big advocates of ethanol because they were selling a lot of the inputs for that, and now you can't really get rid of it, even though we now know it's terrible for automobiles and it's more environmentally damaging than fossil fuels, but nevertheless, it's got a built-in constituency.
So, Bill, where do you see which sectors are you optimistic for growth in the short term? Where do you see some sunlight?
Well, I think healthcare is going to be I think we need new business models in healthcare, but I think in terms of startups and new ventures, I think healthcare could be very promising. We're going to be rethinking our cost structure. What are we spending now? 20% of the GDP in healthcare, way too much, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be. You can do the macro study, and then you can see which individual companies are likely to defeat the incumbents in that area. I think that's promising. Obviously, artificial intelligence, everything tech related has got a lot of growth.
Right.
And so, and I think just basic industries will be just fine. So my portfolios, I've got an awful lot of large cap multinational dividend paying stocks, and I think if you're an investor, that's a great place to be. I just calculated yesterday that I'm up 40 basis points this year. What's the market down 6 or 7%? So holding on to some mundane stuff can be a good place for an investor to be. Uh, you're pretty close to this. What do you think?
Well, actually, I want to ask you. I can't let you off the hook there. Is it? I mean, those numbers are really impressive. Obviously, which companies are you invested in? Can you disclose that?
Well, it's a portfolio. I'm in the evil pharmaceutical companies. I'm in the
The
food
evil.
companies. I'm in all the companies that Bobby Kennedy hates.
There you go.
And a lot of energy companies and, the companies that were not as sexy as the Magnificent Seven. And so I lagged the market during that period, but now I'm doing pretty well. But, they're household names and insurance companies, not so much banks. I don't like the banks' balance sheets. You can't analyze them. Um, but, companies that people have heard of and they're going to be around. And the other thing is that we've got one of the unfortunate things in the last 25, 30, 40 years is the reality is we've got a lot of entrenched incumbents in a lot of industries, and it's hard to dislodge them. But it also means if you're an investor and if they're paying dividends, they can be a pretty good place to hide.
Bill, Nelson Mandela's family works with me. They're clients of mine and business partners. And his oldest living child, Maki Mandela, once said something to me that's fascinating. She said, if everybody's making money, all the other liberties fall into place,
Yeah.
right? Like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to assemble, da 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 da. Da. Like you make money, you're happy, society cooks. It's great, right? So she uh, mentioned this to me, and in hearing you speak today, uh, I'd be remiss to not get your opinion about the idea of income inequality, or the class, the way the classes are broken up. I mean, we've seen to a certain amount like this dissipation of the middle class, and we have I think a separation now of upper class and lower class like we've never had before. If the lower class of society is not creating wealth, if they're not secure economically, it disrupts everything else. Do you think Trump's policies will create more equality, or do you think there's a lot of people are screaming like billionaires are making more money and it's his policies are just to benefit the upper class? But from your perspective, do you think his new policies or the policies he's talking about enacting will create a more balanced level of income across the country?
Well, I don't know that I'm a contrarian, but I've got a different take on this. And what I'm concerned about, we talk about people's consumption and their income and where they fit into the income ladder. I'm equally concerned with the work part of it. Is what kind of meaningful work can people get? And I think work is highly related to human dignity and human flourishing. And so when
I
Trump
agree.
talks about bringing manufacturing back and good jobs, he's really talking about meaningful work. And I think there's a big correlation, strong correlation between people who have jobs that they find rewarding, and it can be any kind of job as long as they feel like they're contributing. You've got happier people regardless of how much money they're making. And I think the underlying, and Bob Lighthizer talked about this, we've hollowed out a lot of work, and I think if we start bringing back higher content jobs, and I think it's going to happen naturally because people are going to have to know more, a lot more technology than they did. I think I'd rather press on those policy buttons and than necessarily worry about income distribution. I think that if we focus on work, creating the right kind of jobs, the income is going to be there.
Yeah, I think that's really actually a very astute point from you. The idea of individual productivity, right? People feel good. There's a psychology to it. If you're out and you're productive, you're working, you feel better about yourself. And as a result, your confidence is higher and you could create more, and the people around you are happier as well. I think that's a really interesting approach, Bill. I agree with you. I think that's a very astute
Well,
point.
you think about it, the left really at every step demonizes work, and started with Karl Marx, who never worked a day in his life. He was supported by Engels. Never
Exactly.
stepped foot in a factory,
Nice.
although he wanted to liberate the labor. They've been demonizing work forever, and I think championing good work and good jobs, that creates a very different, very positive societal and community effect. That I think we ought to be. I think we ought to strive for that more than worrying about income inequality.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I really do. So, Bill, you've given me a tremendous amount of your time and super valuable insight. Is there anything else in these topics that we're covering today that you'd like to address or
I want to
any?
hear from you. I've read
Oh
some of
boy.
your book on artificial intelligence, which I highly commend. I didn't get through all of it, but I did get through your conclusion. And everybody's concerned about where artificial intelligence is going and how we need to be concerned about reining it in. You're an optimist, and I listening, reading your arguments and listening to you, I think you're probably right. But where do you see the risks and the potential with AI?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk, thank you for asking. I appreciate that you just hijacked my show. Um,
Well,
I
I've
think
got my own show. I'm used to doing that.
I love you, Bill
Answering all these
Walton.
questions is something I don't normally do.
Well, I got to tell you, I think the single biggest risk is people. I believe that artificial intelligence is a tool. I think Steve Jobs once said that a computer for an individual is like a bicycle. If you can imagine how a computer accelerated the individual's growth and productivity, like a bicycle would speed it up. I believe that artificial intelligence is like a rocket ship, but it's a tool. And it becomes dangerous if the people don't treat it responsibly. I think we need to look at it now during this training period as similar to the way we take care of our children and the next generation. We need to be careful. We need to train it appropriately. But ultimately, it's the individual that will weaponize AI. AI is not going to come in and take over. Algebra is not going to kill you and your family. It's not going to kill me and my family, right? It's going to be the people. And we see that with weapons and tools and other things. And it's interesting. I get into the conversation on this show quite a bit. Like the CEO of Extend Drones, incredible company. He highlights the fact that his with AI, his company will save lives, and he's doing a lot of search and rescue missions all over the world now. And of course, they have the ability to attack too. In fact, he has contracts with the Department of Defense. However, at the end of the day, there are bad actors, and bad actors will use tools to hurt people. And that's what I think is the biggest risk. It's the people.
What do you see about the race between the US and China? We're talking about bad actors. I mean,
Yeah.
and AI is programmed by people, and people have values, and they can just move people's perceptions one way or another. How would I can't I really don't understand how an AI war would be fought, China versus the United States. I don't know what the battlefield would be.
Well, there are two issues, right? There's the psychological and educational piece, and then there's the physical war.
Yeah.
Okay. We've been talking about AI wars, specifically US versus China, here on the show for over a year now. And it's real. A year ago, or a month ago, even, I would have said to you, Bill, that we're about 2 years advanced ahead of China as it relates to research and development. But with DeepSeek
Yeah.
coming into the marketplace, it shows us we're neck and neck. We are tied. So, what does that mean? As it relates to hardware, the evolution of warfare, of war machines, I believe we're going to see a fundamental change, a rebalancing. I call it the post nuclear period, where AI is going to fuel different types of weapons from drones and drone swarms to autonomous vehicles like jet fighters, vehicles that will be in the oceans and the seas. The nature of the Navy will change. And what happens there is smaller nations that don't have the capabilities like America are going to leverage those efficiencies of time and money to come after us. So you'll see these rogue nations, these terrorist nations leveraging artificial intelligence with physical weapons that are going to hurt us. And I understand that Pete Hegseth is already making serious commitments with regards to strategy as well as acquisition of weapons that are fueled by AI so we could fight off those smaller players who are going to pop up. There's no doubt about it. Think about America as a tanker and these rogue nation states that could use AI for very little money to set off swarms of drones and beyond. Think about what we just saw with like Iran attacking Israel regularly, or the use of drones in Ukraine, Russia. We're going to see that all over the place, but we need to be prepared to fight these speedboats effectively,
Yes.
these nations that are going to go quicker. On the intellectual side, it's an issue. If you're going back to DeepSeek, like DeepSeek has been trained in a way that is really pro-Chinese. It's as if Confucius trained it. So if you ask DeepSeek questions about the history of China, Xi Jinping, Tiananmen Square, and beyond, it's answering in a way that Western people don't understand. Like it's like erased the fact that Uyghurs are slaves from its training model. So now think in terms of who's using that training model. So 2 million people in the United States downloaded DeepSeek immediately when it became available because it was free. Who's getting it? Young people, Gen Z, millennials, the next generation. And if they're using DeepSeek's training to educate themselves about the world and world history, that could be problematic too. It could, create you laugh about Marx and Engels, but it could create a mindset of communism. So I think the war is real. It's not just an economic war. I think there's a physical piece of it as well as a mental piece of it, and we need to win that war, Bill.
Well, it's funny because both ChatGPT and Claude uh, are strongly biased on the left, and you ask them about economic growth, and they give you the Keynesian playbook. It's like written by you know by the FDR administration that talks about social programs and government stimulus and that sort of thing. But the fun thing about that is you can say to it, come on, really? We know that's never really worked. Tell me about what happens if you cut taxes and if you do this. And I give it a supply side prompting, and it'll come back with a good analysis. So it's in there, but you got to dig it out. I don't think DeepSeek would do that for you.
No, DeepSeek is good though, but without a doubt, like AI right now, 10% of the population is using AI for search purposes, and it's better. At the end of the day, you talk about Perplexity, you talk about Chat GPT. The experience is far superior than Google today, right? You're
I
not
don't use
getting
Google. I
advertising.
don't use Google anymore
Yeah,
to search. I use one of the AI machines.
yeah, it's much better. It's far superior. There's no advertising. You don't have to go digging in links. You get in a matter of seconds, you get the question, your text prompt answered in a way that is cogent. You have the reasoning there now. It's incredible. So, Bill, I'm not going to let you hijack my show anymore. I
Sorry.
got to end the show with
Okay.
one. There's so every guest comes on. I give a leading question that starts with the name of the show, Some Future Day, which is inspired by a James Joyce thing. And then I allow for my guests to finish. Bill Walton, are you game?
Oh, I'm definitely game. Where do you want me to go with this?
Okay, so in some future day, artificial intelligence will change America's economic model by.
Well, it'll change our economic model by how what people work at. And I mentioned before, I think rewarding jobs are a great place to start when we think about economic policy, which is really new. We haven't really thought about that. I think that productivity growth could be enormous. We could be looking at 4, 5, 6, 7%, and so we're going to see a lot more real economic growth through AI. And I think the kind of innovations which AI is going to help us make will create industries and jobs that can't even conceive now. It's like 10 years ago you couldn't think about influencers as being an actual career. Now it's definitely that. So I'm basically optimistic, and I don't really worry about AI, the science fiction scenario where it turns against us. I think one of the things that's happening in AI is it's not just one group that's creating it; it's many, 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 many people, and it's like a marketplace of AI machines. And I think out of that competition will come a lot of good.
Bill Walton, thank you so much for joining me on Some Future Day today. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, great fun. Thanks, Mark. This is good. This is good. Next time I'm gonna interview you. I'll have you back on, and I can make you answer all the questions, which would be fun.
I would be honored, Bill. I would be honored. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Some Future Day. I know your time is super valuable, so I hope you learned how you can leverage emerging technology to improve your life. And exciting news, my new book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything, is now available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and other major booksellers across the globe. I am so proud to share that because of your support, the book topped the charts. It became #1 bestseller in cryptocurrency, #1 bestseller in artificial intelligence, and #1 bestseller in robotics. So, if you're curious and ready to learn how AI can enhance your career, your community, and your family, get yourself a copy today.